Growing up, I enjoyed studying history, and not just of people and ideas, but of lesser-known buildings and monuments. Some I saw firsthand. Now, the gift to the Harvard University campus from the class of 1875 is a towering ornate stone gate, whilst the gift to the campus of my future alma mater, Hillsdale, from the same class, 1875, is a knee-high stone block. But simple as it is, this block reads two words in bold: prove it. Coming from a college that after almost 2 centuries still dares to offer a classical education, no less in a country that currently fosters online diploma mills, runaway grade inflation, student loan crises, and the entitlement era, this challenge to prove it is one which I support. After all, the college considers itself, in its own words, a trustee of modern man's intellectual and spiritual inheritance from the Judeo-Christian faith and the Greco-Roman culture, a heritage finding its clearest expression in the American experiment of self-government under law, end quote. Puzzling to some, Hillsdale College is a non-religious institution, but constantly invoking the famous passage about how a city on a hill cannot be hidden, it shares in the inherently Christian ideal that when choosing your principles, permanence is key. And we at this conference know that the scriptures are a good start. There will be many things to prove as we sally forth. In keeping with the theme of soaring above it all, I should start by saying that I haven't always done so. I had a friend who was so rich in reverence for the Lord when I was a child that one afternoon as we were building a treehouse in his backyard, he suddenly panicked and asked that we not pound any more nails that day, for he had only then realized that it was a Sabbath day. Following his lead, I put down my tools and we walked away. All I remember concerning my friend from the years following is how I stood by and watched his fall from grace into a lifestyle far less savory. No details, but the whole ordeal reminded me of the song How to Save a Life by The Fray, which some here may remember was scooped up by the religious crowd as it became a hit song in its own right. That time was for me some year or two before high school. My prodigal friend is still out there somewhere, being young and making mistakes, but like anyone who has knowingly slapped aside salvation's hand, even in moments of relative safety, there is constant danger. If stories like this are new to you, you haven't been paying attention. It is just a taste of the ideology that is the modern American 20-something-year-old, wherein you may have grown up going to church, as surely as you may have grown up putting your lost baby tooth under your pillow. But nevertheless, a belief in God is something to be outgrown once you go to high school and then college and then suddenly become convinced that the Christian faith demands too much of the ordinary human being or is simply uncool. With the later help of their tenured professors, the result is a society where children are almost systematically turned against the beliefs of their parents, not unlike 1970s Cambodia under the Khmer Rouge. Yes, I mentioned church-going because when I was growing up, it wasn't my classmates from non-religious households whose faith in the Almighty fell to doubt. No, it was the kids who burned the religious candle at both ends, if you will, who predictably burned out the fastest. They were the Pharisees when they needed to beat Jesus. He could count them for me on both scarred hands, and occasionally I numbered among them. I'm called an old soul, sometimes playfully by the people who know me best, a human anachronism. There's an unsettling truth to that. In my most despairing moments, I felt and still feel that the world has left me behind, socially, politically, spiritually, technologically, even romantically. People like me have made in their lives fatal first impressions before those whose judgment succumbs to such a thing. Simply put, we were not who we needed to be. Sometimes when a young man is truly impressed upon by a young woman, especially Christians both, his words and actions will misrepresent him. Perhaps for years at a time, but such things should not be taken as a sample of his true character. There is more to him. In creating the famous Mr. Fitzwilliam Darcy of the novel Pride and Prejudice, some would say that author Jane Austen understood this male phenomenon better than any woman since. In any case, God's judgment does not work this way. He had uses for this old soul of mine after all. For attempts in high school to simply befriend underclassmen usually resulted in me becoming, especially to the girls, something of a father figure instead. This was fitting because quite a few of these high school students were and are without their actual fathers and sometimes their mothers, and here we scratch the surface of our problem. Children raised to be Christians avoid sin for little reason other than fear of punishment, be it divine or parental. It is only once we grow up, hopefully, that we learn to appreciate God's plan and be virtuous for virtue's sake. But the teenage years are difficult for most, or at least seem that way at the time. So then it is helpful to be reminded that God is like a good parent. Though loving, he allows his children to experience times of pain so that they may better identify times of joy. Many peers my age don't understand the metaphor because never before seen rates of imprisonment, abandonment, and divorce have stolen from them a world where they know what good parents do or do not do, and thus many of them do not know God. The name Cicero until college was familiar to me only as the urban former home of the Berean Bible Students' Church. This was long before I knew anything about its Roman namesake Marcus Tullius Cicero, one of the key founders of our Western heritage. His ideas were instrumental in the American founding, and his works are among Hillsdale students' reading requirements and reading pleasures. I had a professor, in fact, very passionate about teaching, who believed that despite dying half a century before the birth of Christ and thus never knowing of him, Cicero managed to touch on the very essence of Christianity. As my professor put in class, "You were so close, Cicero, so close." Very quickly, here's why. Unlike all Romans at the time, Cicero was a monotheist. He also believed that we are all tied together as one universal body by the logos of the soul, a concept later found repeatedly in the Gospel of John. And last but not least, he was martyred by the authorities because of his ideas, which was not a pretty occurrence. But one of Cicero's quotes means a lot to me. It comes from his treatise on duties and reads in Latin, "Non nobis solum natus sumus, otesque nostri partem patria vindicat partem amici." We are not born, we do not live for ourselves alone. Our country, our friends have a share in us. I taped this quote to the frame of a photograph I own, which depicts a certain U.S. president standing beneath the shadow of the two-level storefront of the tiny room in which he was born, in the equally tiny town of Tampico, Illinois. With so much at his fingertips, what humility it took to return there. Again, our country, our friends have a share in us. It's a divisive quote in this day and age, seen as the government is ever hungrier for a share of us too, as some would have it. But for me, it is rather an expression of my gratitude, to all of you included. The path I'm interested in after college, and have been since I was about 10 years old, may very well call for me to surrender a comfortable American lifestyle in the hopes that many others may one day have it. This past Easter, I thought of the quote again during the better part of a dull late evening, which I spent on the edge of town with a good friend of mine, one whose difficult coming of age did not prevent him from becoming a born-again Christian. Staring out at the great expanse aglow with stars, we turned our thoughts to men and women all throughout history who, though they to great heights aspired, never did lose the fond attachment for the chunk of God's earth that they called home. This feeling, I think, is what the Greeks called the nostos. The term agrarianism is similar but better calls up images of the American heartland, flat with fields of dirt and crop, that I and so many others, for most of our lives, have beheld every day in dusk, practically right out our back doors. To my friend and I that night, those fields were like new. It made me more aware than ever that even in our most familiar and mundane places, great meaning can be found. And once you find it, that is when you soar above. Thank you. God bless.